By the time the elevator doors slid open onto the lobby, the story had already grown its own legs. Newspaper boxes by the entrance screamed the headline in thick black ink: "Contractor convicted for assault on judge in courthouse garage." Beneath it, a smaller caption: "Attack on black female judge raises questions about courthouse culture." In the security line, people whispered without bothering to lower their voices. "That's her, right? The black judge from the garage. You hear it was just a misunderstanding till the video came out?" 3 floors above the murmur, Judge Marlene Ashford stood alone in her chambers. The world outside held at arm's length by a heavy oak door. She rolled up the cuff of her robe just enough to see the faint white crescent on her forearm where Garrett Hollister's fingers once dug in. The bruise was long gone. The memory wasn't. In the top drawer of her desk lay a worn photograph of her uncle, Marcus Ashford, smiling in a backyard before the prison years carved him down. Next to it, a folded thank you note from a family whose son had walked free because Marlene had insisted on every rule being followed, every corner checked. She thought of the fallout no one saw on the headlines. A security supervisor quietly pushed out after an internal report. A former chief judge now waiting to self-surrender to federal prison. A well-dressed couple named Hollister trading their designer clothes for state-issued jumpsuits. All of that because of one morning everyone assumed would be routine. A knock broke the silence. Her judicial assistant cracked the door. "Judge, there's someone here asking to speak with you. She says it's about the garage." Marlene hesitated for half a heartbeat. "Send her in." The woman who stepped inside was in her early 50s, black, in a faded church dress and sensible shoes. She clutched her purse like it was the only solid thing in the room. "Good morning," Marlene said. "Have a seat." The woman sat on the edge of the chair, back stiff, eyes flicking from the wall of law books to the framed certificates, to the photo of Marcus, to the small scar on Marlene's arm before she could hide it again. Her voice wobbled on the first word, then steadied like she forced it to. "Judge, I know you've been through something like this." She swallowed. "This morning, in the court parking, one of the guards told me I didn't belong there. He put his hand on my shoulder when I tried to walk past." Her eyes shone, but she refused to let the tears fall. "They told me if I complain, nothing will happen. That it's a waste of time. But I heard what you did." The room went very quiet. Marlene felt the old ache stir at the base of her skull, right where concrete had once met bone. Behind the woman's story, she could hear echoes of 100 others that never made it onto paper. She turned toward the window. From this angle, she could see straight down into the concrete maze of the courthouse garage. Level 2. The pillars. The spaces painted in dull white lines. To anyone else, just a parking lot. To her, the fault line where everything had shifted. She looked back at the woman. "Start from the very beginning," Marlene said softly. "Tell me exactly what happened." The woman took a breath, like someone about to step into deep water. And as she began, Marlene knew one thing for certain. Before the system cracked open, it hadn't started with an indictment or a headline. It had started with a morning that looked like every other morning until the wrong people decided a black woman in a courthouse parking lot didn't belong. At 5:48 a.m., Marlene Ashford's eyes opened to the dark ceiling of her bedroom. No alarm, no snooze button, just the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall and a body trained by 12 years on the bench. She lay still for a breath, listening. The old air conditioner hummed. Somewhere in the distance, a freight train rolled past the old army base where her father had once worked himself nearly to death. Same neighborhood, different life, she thought, and swung her legs out of bed. The house was small, neat, unremarkable from the outside. Inside, everything had a place. The coffee scoop lived in the canister, exactly 2 tablespoons every morning. She measured, leveled the top with her finger, and let the machine gurgle to life while she stood at the kitchen window watching the sky fade from black to a deep navy. Miami was always loud by mid-morning. At this hour, it still pretended to be gentle. Her clothes were already waiting in the hallway closet. Cream blouse on the left hanger, navy slacks on the right, low black heels lined up beneath. She dressed without turning on the overhead light, moving by muscle memory. On the dining table, today's case files sat in a precise stack. State v. Williams, State v. Morrison, Chen v. County of Miami-Dade, each tabbed by color, each annotated in her tight script. If someone had asked her when this habit began, she would have said it started with law school. The truth was older. It started with a father who ironed his uniforms on Sunday nights and lined his boots at the foot of his bed. A man who believed that chaos could be held back if you folded your shirts just right. Her phone buzzed with the daily calendar reminder. She silenced it without looking. She already knew what was coming. Court at 9. Motion hearing at 10. Sentencing at 2. Somewhere between all of that, the 100 small decisions that made up a day on the bench. She believed in those decisions, believed in rules and procedures, and the idea that if you prepared well enough, if you followed the law carefully enough, the system would give you something close to fairness. If you do it right, it will hold, she had once told a nervous public defender. She believed that too. In her mind, the image that always came when she thought about justice was not a blindfolded lady with scales. It was the courthouse itself, heavy and square and stubborn against the Miami heat. Imperfect but standing. She had seen what happened when people fell into the machine unprepared, like the older man from the week before, shuffling in with his cap in his hands, terrified of the courtroom as if it were an execution chamber. "The court isn't here to crush you, Mr. Lopez," she had told him gently from the bench. "It's here to judge fairly. That means I listen to you. I listen to the state. I look at the law. Then I decide. Not before." In the hallway afterward, as she walked back to chambers, one of her colleagues had fallen into step beside her, a white judge with thinning hair and a permanent coffee stain on his tie. "You're too idealistic, Ashford," he'd said, chuckling. "This system eats people like us alive." She had smiled, the practiced polite version that never quite reached her eyes. "Systems can be fixed," she'd replied. "That's why we're here." That was what she believed at 6:22 a.m. when she locked her front door and walked to her car with her leather bag on her shoulder and her case files arranged in perfect order. On the way downtown, the radio murmured background noise until a particular phrase caught her ear. Department of Justice announced today it is opening a civil rights investigation into allegations of racial bias in the Brookfield County court system. She turned the volume up. The anchor's voice rolled through terms she knew well. Pattern or practice. Discriminatory enforcement. Complaint after complaint ignored. She felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with coffee. "That's not my courthouse," she said aloud, almost like a rebuttal, and clicked the radio off. Silence reclaimed the car. Her phone rang through the car speakers. Patricia Okonkwo's name flashed on the dash. "Morning, Patty." Marlene answered. "You up?" Patty's laugh was dry. "Of course you're up. Listen, you have a minute?" "I'm driving in." "What's wrong?" "Nothing new. Same old mess. Security downstairs gave me a hard time yesterday. Again. 3 times they asked for my ID, like the barcode on my attorney badge was a suggestion. Made me empty my whole briefcase onto the table, like I was trying to sneak in a bomb." Marlene frowned, picturing the lobby, the metal detectors, the bored guards. "Did you talk to a supervisor?" she asked. "He was standing right there," Patty said, watching it like a show. "Then file a complaint," Marlene said. "The system only works if we use it. You know that." On the other end, Patty went quiet for a beat. "Yeah," she said finally. "Sure, I'll put it on my list, right under end mass incarceration and pay my student loans. Have a good day on the bench, Judge." The call clicked off. If something like that happens again, file a complaint. It was a good line, correct, procedural. And yet the way Patty had laughed stuck with her as she took the exit for downtown. Across town in a white Ford pickup that smelled like coffee and drywall dust, Garrett Hollister drummed his fingers on the steering wheel while his wife applied lipstick in the visor mirror. "Do you think this judge is going to yell at you?" Bryn asked, lips pursed. "It's a speeding ticket," Garrett said. "I'll plead it down, pay the fine, be back on site by 10. You were doing 80 in a 45. I was keeping up with traffic." He flashed her a grin. "Besides, our company's got the crane in the judge's lot today. I told Torres we practically own that building." Bryn snapped the visor closed. "You always say that." "Because it's true," Garrett said. "Hollister and Sons has poured concrete for half the structures in this county. Every time they walk into a courthouse, they walk over my work. Those judges know which side their bread's buttered on." He said it with the easy confidence of a man who had never once been made to feel like he didn't belong anywhere he walked. The white pickup merged into downtown traffic, sliding into the stream of cars heading toward the beige bulk of the courthouse. In the rearview mirror, the crane on the flatbed behind him loomed like a metal skeleton. Marlene's sedan reached the secure entrance first. She slowed, expecting the usual. Guard, nod, gate lifting up to the judge's reserved lot behind the building. Instead, a bright orange barricade blocked the driveway. A construction crane and 3 trucks crowded the asphalt beyond, all stamped with the same logo in blue and gray, Hollister and Sons Commercial Contracting. A man in a hard hat glanced up from his phone as she rolled down her window. "Morning," Marlene called. "Judge's lot is closed." "Whole area's shut down today, ma'am," he said, waving his clipboard vaguely. "Concrete pour and crane work. You'll have to use the public garage." "For how long?" He shrugged. "All day, probably. Orders from upstairs." She looked past him at the empty spaces where she usually parked, at the familiar door that led directly into the judge's hallway. It was a small inconvenience, nothing more. "No problem," she said, forcing a smile. "A parking spot is just a parking spot." She circled the block and pulled into the public structure on the opposite side of the courthouse. The pay gate spat out a ticket. The digital sign flashed Level 2 open. On Level 2, the concrete was cool and dim, the light striping through gaps in the wall. She eased the sedan into a space, shifted to park, and killed the engine. For a moment, she sat with her hands on the steering wheel, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. Then she gathered her bag and stepped out into the echoing quiet, locking the car with a soft chirp. Across the lane, a white pickup sat 3 spaces down, engine idling. Its headlights flicked on as if in response to her door closing. Through the windshield, 2 faces turned to watch her, a broad-shouldered man with a sunburned neck, and a woman with perfectly highlighted hair clutching her purse like it was armor. Marlene adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder and headed toward the elevator, her heels tapping out a steady rhythm on the concrete. She felt their eyes on her, a prickle between her shoulder blades, but told herself what she always told herself. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. Somewhere deep inside the building, a clock struck 7. She believed the law would protect her. She did not know that on this particular morning, the law was about to sit quietly and watch while she was tested. The courthouse garage on Level 2 was never meant to hold history, just concrete fluorescent light and Tuesday mornings. Marlene's heels clicked softly as she walked toward the elevator, the sound echoing off gray pillars and scattered cars. Somewhere above, a door thudded shut, distant and dull. She could hear the low hum of the elevator machinery, the faint bing as it stopped on another floor. Behind her, a truck door slammed. "Hey!" The voice cut through the quiet, sharp enough to make her shoulders tense. She did not turn right away. She had learned years ago that sometimes the safest thing was to pretend you hadn't heard. "Hey, I'm talking to you." She stopped then, turned. Garrett Hollister was already striding toward her, big frame filling the lane between parked cars. Behind him, Bryn shut the passenger door of the white pickup, clutching her designer purse to her chest. Her eyes were wide, but not with fear. Performance came naturally to her. "You don't belong here," Garrett said, planting himself in front of Marlene. "This is courthouse parking. Authorized people." Marlene let her gaze slide past him to the sign bolted to the nearest pillar, white letters on blue metal. Miami-Dade County Courthouse parking open to authorized personnel and court visitors 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "It says court visitors and authorized personnel 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., she replied. "I'm a court visitor. It's 7:14. Garrett snorted, like she'd told a joke. "Court visitor," he repeated. "What kind of court business?" "The kind that's none of your business," she said. Bryn made a sharp little noise behind him, half gasp, half scoff. "Garrett, she's being hostile," Bryn called. "She's just standing there, staring. She won't say why she's here. She's acting suspicious. Call security. I'm calling 911. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands, but Marlene could see it clearly. That wasn't fear. That was adrenaline wrapped in entitlement. It would have been so easy to end it there. There was a script she knew by heart. Smile. Soften your voice. Over-explain. "I'm just here for a hearing, sir. Here's my ID. Sir. I promise I won't be any trouble, sir." She had performed it at 18 in a department store while a clerk followed her down every aisle. At 22, when a law professor had looked at her and asked if she was there to empty the trash. At 35, when a bailiff had assumed she was a defendant's girlfriend instead of the attorney. If she played that role now, this man might step aside. His wife might hang up. No one would get hurt. She could ride the elevator up, sit on the bench, and tell herself it was not worth making a scene. But another memory rose up, uninvited. Her father's voice when he told her, years later, why he had stopped talking about Uncle Marcus. How an entire system had decided her uncle was disposable because of what he looked like, where he lived, who he knew. Fear was there, a low, cold thrum in her chest, but something else was louder. I will not perform politeness to buy the safety I already deserve. Marlene adjusted the strap of her bag, looked Garrett in the eye, and chose. I've answered your question, she said evenly. Now I'm walking to the elevator. You're in my way. He blinked, thrown for a second that she hadn't folded, hadn't shrunk herself to fit the box he'd built for her. You think you're smart, huh? He said, stepping closer. She could smell coffee on his breath. Reading signs, quoting rules. You think that makes you belong here? I don't need to belong, she said. I need to get to the elevator. She took a step. He did not move. Something in him tightened. Garrett had woken up that morning with a knot already forming in his gut. Bids going sideways, material costs climbing, his father's old company name on the line, a speeding ticket waiting to bleed more money. All the little resentments of a man who believed the world owed him smooth roads. Now here was this woman, this stranger, refusing to be impressed by him, refusing to be intimidated, refusing to apologize for taking up space in what he considered his domain. Every frustration he hadn't voiced at banks and inspectors and judges found a target right in front of him. I told you to leave, he said, voice dropping low. Last warning. She did not back away. At 7:17 a.m., in a gray garage that smelled of oil and dust, the line was crossed. Garrett's hand shot out and clamped around her left forearm, fingers digging into flesh. He yanked, twisting, and shoved her backward into the concrete pillar behind her parking space. The impact made a hollow, sick sound, the back of her head meeting concrete with a dull thud that seemed to ring inside her skull. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to static. Her case files slipped from her grip, manila folders exploding across the floor. Her reading glasses skittered away, one lens cracking as it hit the oil-stained concrete. Air rushed out of her lungs. For a second, the instinct screamed. Fall, curl in, disappear. She did not fall. Her palm slammed against the pillar, catching her weight. Her other hand was still wrapped around her phone. Her ears rang, but her voice, when it came, was steady. Garrett loomed over her, face flushed, hand lifting again. Now, he said, are you going to leave, or do I need to help you? Marlene unlocked her phone with her thumb. What are you doing? He snapped. Calling 911, she answered. My wife already did, he barked. They're sending someone. Then there will be 2 calls, she said, lifting the phone to her ear. And mine will have a different story. The line rang once, twice, then connected. Miami-Dade 911, what is your emergency? She did not take her eyes off Garrett. I'm in the courthouse parking garage, level 2, near Space 247, she said. I've just been assaulted by a white male, approximately 6'2", around 220 pounds, blue polo shirt. He grabbed my arm and shoved me into a concrete pillar. His wife is present and has called 911 with what I expect will be a contradictory account. Garrett lunged again, his fingers closing around her wrist this time, squeezing hard enough to make her hand spasm. Hang up, he hissed. Hang up that phone. On the line, the dispatcher's voice sharpened. Ma'am, are you still there? Can you describe your location again? I'm still here, Marlene replied. The subject is now grabbing my wrist. I am not resisting. I am standing still. I need an officer dispatched to my location. She said it like she was dictating into the record, because in her mind, she already was. Ma'am, stay on the line. I'm dispatching a unit now. Garrett released her as if burned. For the first time, something like doubt flickered in his eyes. You're lying, he said, but it sounded weaker. You attacked me. Bryn saw it. She'll tell them. She'll tell them what she wants them to believe, Marlene said. Whether they believe her is a different question. The elevator dinged. All 3 of them turned. The doors slid open, and a man in a khaki uniform stepped out, badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Security was stitched over his chest. The metal camera pinned to his collar blinked red. Marlene read the name tag out of habit. Corso V. He took in the scene with one long glance. The well-dressed white couple. The black woman pressed against a pillar. Files scattered. Glasses cracked. Phone in hand. His mind, too, had a choice to make. In training, they had drilled procedures into him. Separate the parties. Maintain the scene. Do not cancel medical or police response until you've fully assessed. He could have followed that. "Ma'am," Corso said, walking toward her, hand out in a gesture that looked like help and felt like hurting. "I'm going to need you to step over here while I sort this out." "I've already called 911, Marlene replied. "My call is logged. I'd like to make a formal report." "We'll get to that," he said. "First, let's separate everyone and calm down." "I'm calm," she said. "I was calm when he grabbed me. I was calm when he shoved me into a pillar. I was calm when his wife called 911 to report me as suspicious." His jaw tightened. "Sir," he turned to Garrett, "can you tell me what happened?" Garrett's voice, when it came, was smooth again. Reasonable. He knew this part. He'd been telling his side of stories his whole life. "We were heading to court," he said, "when we saw this woman behaving suspiciously, checking cars, looking around. My wife felt uncomfortable, so I asked if she needed help. She became aggressive, hostile. When I tried to de-escalate, she grabbed my arm. I defended myself." "That's not what happened," Marlene said. Corso held up a hand without looking at her. "Ma'am, I'll take your statement in a moment." "You'll take it now," she replied, "or you'll take it from the officers when they arrive." "No one needs to involve police in a simple misunderstanding," he said. "It's not simple, and it's not a misunderstanding." Her voice did not rise, but it hardened. "A man assaulted me while I was standing in a public parking structure. His wife called 911 and reported me as a suspicious person. I have a bruise forming on my arm and likely a contusion on the back of my head. That is battery under Florida Statute 784.03. Something passed between the three of them then. Husband, wife, security guard. A quiet recalibration. They had thought she was just a body to move along. Now she was quoting statutes and insisting on records." Corso's radio crackled. "Unit dispatched to courthouse garage. Level 2, possible disturbance." His hand went to the mic. He could have said, "Copy, I have eyes on them. Keep the unit en route." He could have let the officers come, let the stories collide in an official report, let the bruises be photographed before they faded. Instead, he glanced at Garrett and Bryn, at the scattered papers, at Marlene's level stare. Then he turned slightly away, as if that made his words less consequential. "Dispatch, this is Corso, security supervisor at Courthouse Parking Level 2, he said into the radio. "Situation is Code 4, handled, no unit needed." "Copy that," the dispatcher replied. "Canceling dispatch." 8 seconds. That was all it took to erase her emergency. Marlene heard it, all of it. She watched his thumb press the button that turned her 911 call into a footnote. "You canceled my dispatch," she said. "I assessed the situation," Corso answered. "It's handled." "It's not handled," she replied. "I was assaulted. I want to file a report." "You can file a report with courthouse administration," he said. "Third floor. I'll note the incident in my log." "In your log," she repeated. "Not in a police report. Not on the official record, just in your personal notebook." His face stayed professional, but his eyes flickered. "I'd like your badge number for my records," she said. "It's on my uniform," he replied. 4417. "And your supervisor's name?" A beat of hesitation. "That would be Captain Torres," he said. "But I don't think—" "Thank you," she cut in. She bent down, gathered her files, ignoring the sting in her arm and the throbbing at the back of her head. When she straightened, her glasses were crooked, one lens spiderwebbed. She walked past Corso, past Bryn's tight-lipped glare, past Garrett's flushed, unsettled face. At the elevator, she pressed the button. The doors slid open with a soft chime. She stepped in, then turned to face them, holding the door with one hand. "By the way," she said, voice ringing clear in the cold air, "my 911 call and your 911 call will both be on record." Her eyes found Garrett's. "The difference," she said, "is whose story will survive." The doors began to close. For the first time all morning, he looked genuinely afraid, as if he'd just realized he had pushed someone he did not understand in a place that watched everything. The doors shut between them with a soft hiss. That night, none of them slept well. Marlene lay awake, feeling every pulse of pain in her arm and skull, cataloging the details in her mind so she could not be talked out of them later. Garrett stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment the elevator doors closed on that woman's face and the strange certainty in her eyes. Bryn scrolled news on her phone, wondering how bad these things could really get. Corso sat at his kitchen table, staring at his open logbook, pen hovering over a line he could not quite bring himself to write honestly. They would all tell themselves a version of the story. Only one of them would be willing to let the truth be written down. The morning after, the courthouse pretended nothing had happened. On the 6th floor, the bailiff opened the door and called out in a steady voice, "All rise." Marlene pushed herself up from her chair in chambers and walked through the side door to the bench, as she had thousands of times before. Her robe brushed against her arm, and she felt the ache bloom under the fabric, where 4 purple fingerprints were spreading across her skin. "Good morning," she said, settling in. "You may be seated." Her head throbbed with a slow, insistent pulse at the base of her skull, but her voice did not betray it. She read the first case name off the docket, forcing her mind onto legal terms and record citations instead of the hollow thud of bone on concrete. From the gallery, no one would have known that less than 24 hours earlier she had stood in the same building wondering whether anyone in it would believe her. A defendant shuffled up to the podium. An attorney cleared his throat. The court reporter's keys clicked. The machine of justice ground forward, indifferent to bruises hidden under black fabric. Downstairs in Traffic Court 4B, Garrett and Bryn Hollister sat in a row of hard wooden benches, waiting for a speeding ticket to be called. "You nervous?" Bryn whispered. "It's a traffic judge," Garrett muttered back. "I'll plead no contest. Pay the fine. We're done." 20 minutes later, that was exactly what happened. $400 and a nod from the judge. And it was over. No mention of the garage. No officers waiting in the hallway. No hint that anything about yesterday would follow them. As they walked back toward the lobby, Garrett felt his shoulders loosen. He could almost convince himself the whole thing had been nothing. A crazy morning, a difficult woman, a security guard who had handled it. Then Bryn stopped so abruptly he nearly walked into her. "Garrett," she hissed. "Look." On the far wall, 6 flat screens played silent feeds from various courtrooms. One showed a jury picking, another an attorney pacing. On the third monitor, a black woman in a black robe sat at the bench, flipping through a file, listening to an argument. Garrett's throat went dry. "That's her," Bryn said, voice barely more than air. "That's the woman from the garage." The camera angle was unflattering, slightly tilted, washed out by overhead lights. There was no mistaking her anyway. Same face, same posture, same calm that had infuriated him when she stared him down by the elevator. A caption at the bottom of the screen scrolled. "Honorable Marlene L. Ashford presiding." "She's a judge," Bryn whispered. "Garrett, that woman you grabbed is a judge." For a brief second, something like nausea rolled through him. He thought of his hand on her arm, of shoving her into concrete, of the words she had spoken right before the elevator closed. "My call and your call will both be on record." "She didn't say," he muttered, as if that were a defense. "She didn't tell us who she was. Do you think she's going to do something?" Bryn asked. "Should we call Delmore?" He did not answer, but his hand was already reaching for his phone. Upstairs, Marlene's morning docket ended at 11:30. The minute she stepped off the bench, the courtroom buzz softened, as if someone had turned the volume down on a television. In chambers, she peeled the robe off carefully, wincing as the fabric brushed the bruise on her arm. She studied it in the small restroom mirror. Yesterday's faint marks were a deep, angry purple now, each finger outlined like a signature. She took a steadying breath, rolled her sleeve back down, and picked up the phone. "Naomi, I need to see whoever is handling incident reports this morning," she told her judicial assistant. "I'll be at court administration in 10. The intake office on the 3rd floor was painted a bureaucratic beige. A small sign over the counter read, "Incidents and Complaints." Behind the desk sat a woman in her 30s with carefully straightened hair and a nameplate that read, "Naomi Polk, Admin Specialist." "Good morning," Marlene said. "I need to file an incident report regarding an assault that occurred in the courthouse parking garage yesterday." Naomi's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her eyes flicked to the bruise peeking out where Marlene's cuff had ridden up, then to the name on the visitor sign-in she had pulled on her screen. "Judge Ashford," she said slowly. "You want to file a report?" "Yes," Marlene replied. "Date of incident, yesterday's date. time 7:17 a.m., location level 2 of the public parking structure near space 247. Naomi shifted, uncomfortable. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" she asked. These kinds of reports can get complicated. Media, internal reviews. Sometimes it's cleaner if things are handled informally. There it was. The first, soft warning. The first suggestion that quiet would be easier for everyone. Marlene rested her hand flat on the counter so Naomi could see how steady it was. "Complicated or not, I was assaulted," she said. "I'm reporting it. Please include the following in the narrative." She dictated every detail. Garrett's words, Bryn's 911 call, the exact language she herself had used on the line, the moment Vincent Corso arrived, the way he canceled the dispatch. "And one more thing," Marlene added. "Note that Security Supervisor Corso, badge number 4417, canceled the 911 unit after I requested it without taking my statement. I want that included." Naomi's lips pressed together. She typed slowly. "Reports are reviewed by the administrative supervisor," she said, "usually within 72 hours. 72 hours, Marlene repeated. "You are aware that under Administrative Order 2019-14, Section 4B, security footage in the parking structure auto-deletes after 72 hours, unless it's preserved." Naomi blinked. "I think so," she said. "Then add this," Marlene said. "I am requesting immediate preservation of all relevant camera footage from Level 2 of the public parking garage between 7:10 and 7:30 a.m. yesterday. If that footage is not preserved and is allowed to delete, I will be filing a supplemental complaint for spoliation of evidence." For the first time, Naomi looked directly at her. "I'll flag it for immediate review," she said quietly. "Good," Marlene replied. "Please let me know when it's logged." She turned away from the counter and almost collided with a tall figure waiting by the door. "Judge Ashford," Chief Judge Thurston Briley said. "Walk with me." He did not wait for her answer. In his office, the blinds were half closed, light striping across a wall of framed certificates. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk, the same chair she had sat in a dozen times before for evaluations and advice. "I heard about the situation in the garage," he began, steepling his fingers. "Unfortunate. A man grabbed me and shoved me into a pillar," Marlene said. "I would use a stronger word than unfortunate." "A man lost his temper," Briley said. "Altercations happen. What concerns me is where this goes next." "Where it goes next," she said, "is through the proper channels. I filed an incident report. I requested preservation of the footage. Internal Affairs will do what they're supposed to do." He sighed, the long-suffering sound of a patient mentor. "You know how this will play if it gets out," he said. "Black female judge assaulted in her own courthouse. The media will have a field day. They will tear into you, into us, into every case you have ever touched. Defense attorneys will comb through your record looking for bias. Every decision you've made with a white defendant or a black victim will be put under a microscope. And your solution is what?" she asked. "Silence? My solution," he said, "is resolution. The contractor's lawyer has already reached out, quietly. They're willing to make a substantial donation to the legal aid fund. Apologize. Accept internal discipline for the security supervisor. We handle this inside the house." "You're asking me to let it disappear," Marlene said. "I'm asking you to think long-term," he replied. "You have a career worth protecting, Judge. A reputation. You start a fight like this, you don't control where it ends." Her head throbbed harder. She thought of Patty's story about the security line, of the clerk's hesitation at the counter, of Corso's thumb on the radio. "You keep telling me to protect my reputation," she said quietly. "What about my safety? What about the message it sends to every black woman who walks into this building if I let this go?" His jaw tightened. "Sometimes," he said, "you do more good by absorbing the hit and staying in the position where you can help." "If the price of staying in this position is pretending yesterday did not happen," she replied, "then I'm not sure what I'm helping." He leaned back, studying her. "You are making this personal," he said. "He put his hands on my body in our garage," she said. "It is personal." They stared at each other across the polished wood. "What if the media calls?" he asked finally. "I will tell them the truth," she said. "That I reported an assault, and I expect this courthouse to treat my complaint the way it would treat anyone else's." He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them, his expression unreadable. "Very well," he said. "But do not say I did not warn you." That afternoon, while Marlene sat in a neurologist's office having her pupils checked and her reflexes tested, the first wave of public narrative began to form. Attorney Delmore Vance stood in his corner office downtown, tie loosened, speaking into a phone with practiced calm. "A disturbed woman overreacted," he said, watching the traffic far below. "My clients felt threatened. They did what any reasonable people would do in a concrete garage when someone acted strange." On local television, the evening anchor read from a teleprompter over stock footage of the courthouse exterior. An altercation at the Miami-Dade courthouse parking garage yesterday morning has led to conflicting reports, she said. Both sides are alleging assault. Officials have not released any names. Court administration says the matter is under review. No one mentioned the bruises on a black woman's arm. No one said a 911 call had been canceled. No one said the woman was a judge. That evening, Marlene stood in front of her own hallway closet, the one where she hung her robes and her Sunday dresses. On the top shelf sat a small box of family photographs. She pulled it down and thumbed through until she found the picture she wanted. Her Uncle Marcus, laughing at some forgotten joke, an arm around her father's shoulders, light in his eyes that prison would later erase. Her phone rang. She stared at the photo for one more second before answering. "Hey, Dad," she said. "You sound tired," he said. "Long day?" "You could say that." She hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did you ever feel like the system you served might one day turn on you?" she asked. There was a long pause on the line. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than she remembered hearing it when she was a child. "Baby," he said, "I felt like that the whole time I wore the uniform." She looked down at her own uniform hanging in the closet, the black robe that had always felt like armor. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I'm starting to understand." After they hung up, she set Marcus's photo on her bedside table where she would see it in the morning. The house was very still. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere in the distance, rising and falling like a tide. This was only the first wave, and like any wave, it was not finished yet. It was only beginning to rise. The first real punch did not land in a courtroom. It landed in Marlene's inbox. By then, the legal fight had officially begun. Assistant State Attorney Layton had filed charges. Delmore Vance, for his part, responded with a motion titled in neat black letters, "Motion to Preserve Evidence." On paper, it sounded protective. Inside, it was a weapon. In light of an incident initiated by an unidentified, agitated female in the courthouse parking structure, it read, "My client respectfully requests preservation of all footage showing his reasonable efforts to defend his wife from a suspicious stranger." Marlene read the words 3 times. Initiated by, agitated, reasonable. In one paragraph, she had gone from victim to nameless aggressor. Later that night, alone in chambers, a new email slid into her personal account. Not the court address, her private one. No subject line, no signature, just a forwarded message and a single sentence above it. "You should know how they are talking about you." She clicked. From Devance at Holland Law. Tansainchetz, redacted. Subject, Re Hollister matter. If she's courthouse staff, we can argue selective enforcement. Discovery should be interesting. Her stomach went cold. They were not just protecting a client, they were hunting. They were already planning how to drag her through the mud if she insisted on being anything other than quiet. She called Patty from the narrow couch in chambers. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "They're not just defending Hollister," she said. "They are coming for me." "Of course they are," Patty answered. "You scared them. You're a black woman with a robe and a record of rulings. That is the worst kind of witness for them." Within days, the digging started. One morning, Patty arrived in her chambers with a slim folder and a careful expression. "State v. Morrison," she said, setting it down. "Remember it? Drug case 3 years ago. Motion to suppress. Police stop in a high crime area." She had denied the motion, citing the officer's description of the suspect. Height, jacket, backpack, race among several details. "They pulled one sentence from your ruling," Patty said, stripped it of context. "It now reads like you said the defendant's race made him more suspicious." On her laptop, a blog headline glared, "Black Judge Cities Race and Probable Cause Decision." "You know that's not what I did," Marlene said quietly. "I know," Patty replied, "but they're not interested in truth. They're building a picture. Black judge, race talk, family history. Family history, Marlene repeated. What family history? Patty hesitated, then slid a second page across the desk, a grainy photograph of an old court file. At the top, State v. Ashford, Marcus L. charge, possession with intent to distribute. Sentence, 8 years. Underneath, a note written in a careful anonymous hand. Ask your father about this. That night, the house felt smaller than it ever had. Marlene sat at her kitchen table with the case file photo on her phone and the number dialed but not yet called. When she finally pressed the button, her father picked up on the third ring. Hey, baby girl, he said. Everything all right? Not really, she said. Dad, I need to ask you about Uncle Marcus. Silence. Long enough that she wondered if the call had dropped. Why? He said at last. Because someone just sent me his case file like a threat, she said. And because all my life you pretended he never existed. Another long exhale, heavy with years. Marcus made mistakes, he said. But that case was not just his mistakes. Did he do it? She whispered. Did he really have those drugs? No, her father said. He was holding a bag for a friend. That friend turned out to be an informant. The cops made a show. The prosecutor made a name. The judge made an example. Your uncle went away because nobody wanted to see him as anything but what they already decided he was. Who was the judge? Marlene asked, already afraid of the answer. It doesn't matter anymore, he muttered. It matters to me, she said. Who put him away, Dad? Another pause, the longest yet. Thurston Briley, he said. He was just starting out. Young, ambitious. Couple years later, he was climbing the ladder. When you got appointed, he called me. Said he remembered Marcus, that he hoped our family could move forward. Said he'd be watching over your career. Her chest tightened. He knew who I was, she said. The whole time. Yes. And you never told me. I thought I was protecting you, he said, voice cracking. If you knew what he'd done to your uncle, maybe you wouldn't take that bench. And I wanted you up there. I wanted one of us up there. When she hung up, the phone felt heavier in her hand. She sat in the dark with the glow of the screen fading and the realization settling in. It was never just about a parking garage. The courthouse responded like a living organism protecting itself. Some colleagues grew warmer, checking in, asking softly how she was holding up. Others became strangely formal, conversations cut short in the hallway, doors closing a beat quicker when she approached. No one said they were afraid of being dragged into a scandal. They did not have to. Word came down that court reporter Yolanda Fitch, the one whose notes were always immaculate and whose eyes were always just a little too sharp, had been reassigned to night court. Budget reshuffling was the official line. Yolanda found Marlene one afternoon outside the ladies' room. This is about the files I copied, she said bluntly. The complaint history I slipped to internal affairs. They want me tucked away where no one important sees me. Her smile was tight, but there was defiance in it. I knew what I was doing, she said. For what it's worth, I'd do it again. Letters started arriving at Marlene's house. Not many. A few handwritten envelopes with no return address. Some thanked her for standing up. One suggested that perhaps she should remember how quickly a black judge can be replaced if she forgets who gave her the robe. She sat on her couch one night, surrounded by papers and threats and praise and noise, and felt the edges of her world closing in. They are not just trying to deny what they did in that garage, she thought. They are trying to teach me a lesson, to make the pain of speaking louder than the pain of staying quiet. The knock on her chamber's door a week later sounded hesitant. When she looked up, Bailiff Theodore Marsh stood in the frame, hat in hand, lines of 30 years of courthouse air etched into his face. Judge, you got a minute? He asked. For you? Always, she said. He closed the door behind him, glanced once at the wall as if checking for hidden microphones, then took a step closer to her desk. I'm set to retire next year, he said. 29 years in this building. I've seen things. He swallowed. I've watched this place bend rules for the same kind of people over and over, seen complaints disappear, tapes go missing, security guards get a talking to instead of a write-up. He met her eyes. I was there the day they turned that lady away from her son's sentencing because she didn't have the right pass, he said. Corso was in the middle of it. I didn't say enough then. I'm not making that mistake again. What are you saying, Mr. Marsh? She asked. "I'm saying if you're really pushing this," he said, "if it goes to a hearing, if anyone needs to hear what I've seen, I'll testify. Under oath. On the record." It was a small thing. One man, one voice after decades of silence. And yet it felt like a window cracking in a sealed room. That night, Marlene spread the pieces of her life across her kitchen table, the motion twisting her in the narrative, the leaked email plotting selective enforcement, the Morrison headline trying to make her the problem, the photo of Uncle Marcus's file, her father's words, Briley's name on the judgment. She saw it all at once, not as separate storms, but as one long weather system that had been gathering for 30 years. This isn't about one shove in a parking garage, she thought. It never was. Out loud to the empty room, she said it plainly. "The question is not who attacked whom," she murmured. "It is who this system has been choosing, over and over, to stand with, and who it has decided can be pushed into concrete and forgotten." The envelope on Marlene's desk held no letter, just a glossy photo. A filing cabinet drawer yanked open, tabs visible. At the bottom, in blocky black ink, Room B7, basement. 2 hours later, she was standing in cold fluorescent light with investigator Renata Oe, watching a maintenance key turn. The door opened on a room no bigger than a classroom, lined wall to wall with gray metal cabinets. Inside the first drawer, Williams D. 2023, Okonkwo P. 2023, Chen B. 2024, Ashford M. 1997. Each folder was a story someone had tried to tell and the building had refused to hear. In Marcus's file, 3 witness statements that never made it to trial. One from an old housekeeper, Gloria Patterson, describing a young deputy named Corso walking to the garage empty-handed and walking out with a plastic bag he suddenly found. At the bottom, a handwritten note, per TB removed from official file, not relevant to prosecution. Other drawers told the same story in different handwriting. 7 complaints against Corso from black women, stopped at doors, kept from hearings, discouraged, delayed, dismissed. Cross-checked the dates, and Marlene saw the pattern. The worst of them lined up with cases where the presiding judge was always the same name, Chief Judge Thurston Briley. Renata slid a yellowed memo across a metal table. 1998. Internal review of State v. Ashford, language in dense legal prose. Irregularities, concerns, recommendation for further action, then the final line. In light of procedural posture, no further action is recommended. Matter closed. Marlene stared at it until the words blurred. For years, she had told herself the story everyone who still wanted to believe in America's courts told. A few bad actors, a basically good machine. Standing in room B7, surrounded by decades of lost complaints and buried statements, she understood something harsher. The machine was not accidentally broken. It had been tuned, adjusted. Rules bent here, a memo edited there, a camera overwritten at just the right hour, until injustice felt like standard procedure. Her mind flicked back through 12 years of mentorship, the private talks, the gentle warnings, the way Briley always seemed one step ahead of any controversy that might brush her robe. He had not just lifted her up, she realized, he had kept her close. A niece of a man he had helped bury. A living reminder of a case he could not afford anyone to reopen. Renata watched her, arms folded. "Are you sure you want to go after a man who has shaped your entire career?" she asked quietly. Marlene closed Marcus's file, fingers resting on his name. "He shaped it on the grave of my uncle," she said, "and on the silence of every black woman he let this building hurt. I think it is time we shape it into something else." The truth did not flip her world upside down. It did something worse. It turned the mirror around so everyone in it finally had to see exactly who they had been all along. The day the Hollisters came back to court, Marlene was nowhere near the bench. She sat in a small conference room down the hall, watching the plea hearing on a grainy monitor with the sound turned up just enough. In courtroom 9C, Judge Carolyn Reeves presided, her voice steadier than the defendants beneath her. "Mr. and Mrs. Hollister," she said, "you are charged with battery on a judicial officer. How do you plead?" Garrett stood at the defense table in a cheap suit that didn't fit quite right, the swagger wrung out of his posture. Bryn's mascara had been applied carefully, but her hands trembled on the edge of the podium. "Your Honor," Vance said, "my clients will be entering pleas of no contest pursuant to the agreement with the state, and they are prepared to address the court." Reeves nodded. "Mr. Hollister, Garrett turned, facing the gallery. His eyes flicked once toward the camera, as if he could feel Marlene's gaze through the lens, then dropped to the paper in his hand. He cleared his throat. On the morning in question, I confronted Judge Marlene Ashford in the courthouse parking garage. I didn't know who she was at the time, but that isn't really the point. His knuckles whitened around the statement. I treated her like she didn't belong, he said, voice barely above a murmur, because of how she looks. That's the truth. I put my hands on her when I had no right. I'm sorry for what I did. And I'm sorry for what it says about me, that I thought I could get away with it. Bryn's apology was shorter, more polished. She admitted to exaggerating on the 9/11 call, to describing Marlene as aggressive when she was not. She said the words implicit bias like they were lines she had practiced in the mirror. Judge Reeves accepted the pleas, imposed community service, probation, fines. On paper, it looked like resolution. It took less than a year for Garrett to break the agreement. He skipped check-ins. He let the community service hours slide. The fine payments came late, then stopped. When his probation officer filed the violation report, the hearing was quick. Marlene did not watch that one live. She read about it in a one-paragraph update from ASA Layton. Defendant Hollister admitted to willful violations. Court revoked probation, 18 months in state custody. She pictured the man who had bragged about owning the building, standing in a line of orange jumpsuits, boots scuffing concrete, waiting for a guard to tell him where to sleep. That was one price. Another was paid in a quieter hallway months earlier at the end of a long shelf of metal lockers. Internal Affairs findings on Vincent Corso were thick enough to need a binder. Pattern, misuse of authority, discriminatory conduct, failure to follow procedure. The union fought every recommendation. In the end, the discipline was watered down. 90 days unpaid, mandatory training, a return to duty. Corso didn't wait for the clock to run out. 2 days after the ruling, he emptied his locker into a cardboard box, a spare uniform shirt, a coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest Dad," a framed photo of a fishing trip. The glass cracked. A younger officer walked in, stopped, then pretended to need something from the far end of the row. No one met his eyes. The building that had once used him as its filter now looked through him like he was already gone. He signed the resignation paperwork in a cramped HR office, left his badge on the desk, and walked out of the courthouse for the last time. No cameras, no headlines, just a middle-aged man trying not to look like he was running. Some prices arrive wrapped in ceremony. Others slip in through the basement. For Thurston Briley, it was both. After room B7, the ground under him never quite stopped moving. The Department of Justice upgraded its inquiry to a formal investigation. The Judicial Qualifications Commission, embarrassed by what federal agents found in dusty drawers, reopened files it had promised were closed. Briley tried to outrun it. He announced an early retirement to focus on family. He gave a careful interview about the honor of serving. His portrait in the courthouse lobby stared out over the metal detectors as if nothing had changed. Then the indictment dropped. Conspiracy, obstruction, civil rights violations under color of law. Marlene read the news alert on her phone and her kitchen counter, coffee cooling untouched as she scrolled through the counts. Each one felt like a belated acknowledgement of something her uncle had known the day he was cuffed. In the end, the former chief judge took a deal: 18 months in federal prison, $500,000 in restitution to a fund for victims of wrongful conviction and discriminatory enforcement, cooperation with ongoing investigations. When they took his portrait down from the courthouse wall, no one announced it. One day it was there, the next day it wasn't. A pale rectangle of cleaner paint marked the absence, more eloquent than any press release. Justice cost the guilty something. It also charged the people who insisted on it. Marlene kept her job. Her robe still hung on the same hook. Her nameplate still gleamed outside courtroom 6A. But the way people said that name had changed. Some spoke it with respect that bordered on reverence. Others with wary distance. "She's the one who went after Briley," a clerk whispered once, not noticing she was within earshot. "She's the one who made everything messy," another replied. "We used to just come here, do our jobs, go home." The building she had devoted 12 years to no longer felt like solid ground. Every hallway carried the echo of what she had uncovered. Every procedure reminded her how easily rules could be bent to excuse the right kind of wrongdoer. She was no longer the judge who believed the system, if properly fed and maintained, would sort itself out. She was the judge who had dragged its dirty laundry into the sun. For some, that made her a hero. For others, a problem. On her last week before retirement, court reporter Yolanda Fitch stopped by Chambers with a plain envelope and a tired smile. "They're letting me go early," Yolanda said. "Night court did a number on my back. Doctor signed the papers." "I'm sorry," Marlene said. "You deserved better than that." "I knew what they'd do when I started sending those files," Yolanda replied. "I just never thought I'd live to see someone actually use them." She tapped the envelope. "Don't open it now. It's just a thank you for doing the thing the rest of us talked about in break rooms and never had the guts to do." After she left, Marlene held the envelope for a long time before sliding it into her desk drawer. Some weights you honored by not picking at them. The court's prices were measured in months and dollars. The invisible ones were measured in something else entirely, in lost illusions, in sleep interrupted by memories of a concrete pillar, in the way you could never again walk into your workplace without wondering what else its walls had swallowed. On the day Garrett reported to begin his sentence, the prison gate clanged shut behind him, steel on steel. He paused for a fraction of a second like a man realizing a joke had gone on too long, and the punchline was him. Somewhere upstate, in a modest house in the Florida Panhandle, Vincent Corso closed his own front door a little too quickly when a neighbor waved. He had his pension pared down but intact. He had his freedom. He did not have the badge that had once let him decide who belonged. In a federal courtroom with cameras banned but sketches allowed, an older man in a suit that suddenly looked too big for him stood and listened while a judge read out his sentence. 18 months, the judge said. "You of all people knew exactly what the law required. You chose otherwise." No one clapped. Justice, when it finally arrived, sounded a lot like paperwork. That evening, after the news cycles moved on, Marlene drove back to the public garage. Level 2, Space 247 was occupied, but the pillar was the same. The faint gray smear where her head had hit was almost gone now, scrubbed by time and cleaning solution. She stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of lights and distant elevator dings, feeling the weight of everything that had happened between that first shove and this quiet visit. There are losses you can write in a ledger. 18 months here, 90 days there, half a pension, half a reputation. And then there are the other losses. The version of yourself that believed the robe would always protect you. The trust you placed in mentors who turned out to be wardens of their own secrets. The simple comfort of walking through a parking garage without cataloging exits and sightlines. Some prices are paid in years behind bars. Some are paid in the way you never quite look at the world the same way again. She laid her hand on the cool concrete just for a second, then turned and walked toward the elevator. 2 years later, the courthouse felt the same and not the same at all. The Department of Justice consent decree was no longer a headline. It was baked into procedures and trainings and memos taped to break room walls. Security officers sat through mandatory sessions about bias and use of discretion. Some rolled their eyes. Some took notes. Cameras in the garage were on a new system with stricter retention. Code 4 cancellations were no longer made on a shrug. Room B7 no longer held forgotten folders. The cabinets had been emptied, the files scanned and logged. Investigators, lawyers, and families had passed through that basement, pulling history out of metal drawers. The room was just storage now, but the phrase Room B7 had become courthouse shorthand for what happened when you tried to bury people on paper. Upstairs, a small plaque outside a conference room read, "The Marcus Ashford Justice Resource Center." A fund in his name helped families challenge old convictions and pay for investigators and transcripts. Most people who walked by had no idea who Marcus had been. Marlene did. So did a quiet list of others. The echoes showed up in small ways first. Denise Williams got a call from a young attorney who had never met her brother but had read his case file twice. "I think you were right about what happened in that hallway." The lawyer said, "If you are willing, we can ask the court to look again." Barbara Chen received a letter about her son's sentencing, along with an invitation to meet with a civil rights clinic that was reviewing patterns of who had been kept from hearings. Her complaint, once stamped resolved, was now Exhibit B. in a motion that said out loud what had only been whispered. Marlene's chambers began to collect envelopes that did not contain threats. Neat handwriting on lined paper, shaky cursive on church stationery, printed notes with no return address. Seeing you stand up made me file my own complaint. I used to tell my kids, do not fight the system. Now I tell them, learn the rules, then make the system answer you. I work in this building. I saw things for years. I thought I was crazy. Your case made me realize I was just early. Some letters made her smile. Some made her want to throw the whole desk across the room. All of them reminded her that stories did not end at sentencing. On a muggy Thursday afternoon, a knock on her chamber's door interrupted brief writing. Her judicial assistant's voice came through first. Judge, there is a young woman here with her mother. She says she wants to talk to you, not about a case, about security. Marlene hesitated for half a breath, then said, send them in. The girl could not have been more than 23. Slim, braids pulled back, community college hoodie on despite the heat. Her mother was in a faded church dress and sensible shoes, hands folded around a purse worn soft at the corners. Judge Ashford, the young woman began, standing instead of taking the offered chair. Thank you for seeing us. We know you are busy. I am never too busy to hear someone who had trouble in my building, Marlene said. Sit. Tell me what happened. They sat. The story came out in fits and starts. She had come for a traffic ticket. She had cleared the metal detector. Then a security officer at the second checkpoint had given her the kind of look you did not need, explained if you lived in her skin, asked for ID twice, asked why she was really there, suggested maybe she was lost, held her long enough that she almost missed her hearing. We almost let it go, the mother said quietly. We said this is just how it is. Do not stir the pot. Then we remembered the story about you, on the news, in church. People talked about what you did. The girl nodded. I do not want him fired just because I was annoyed, she said. I just need it. Somewhere. I need someone to know it happened. Marlene did not promise punishment. She did not sermonize. She opened a drawer, took out a complaint form, and set it on the desk between them. Here is what I can tell you, she said. The process is slow. It will not fix everything. It will not make this the last time someone treats you like you wandered into the wrong room. But your story deserves to exist on paper. It deserves to be heard and to sit next to other stories like it. She slid a pen across. You write what happened in your own words. I will make sure it goes into the system that nearly forgot me. I cannot promise the ending. I can promise it will not vanish. The girl swallowed hard and nodded. Her hand shook a little as she wrote. Her mother watched, eyes wet with a mix of pride and exhaustion that Marlene recognized from her own father. When they were gone, the chambers felt quiet in a different way, not empty, waiting. In the early years, Marlene had believed consequences arrived to punish bad acts and reward good ones. The system was a scale. You piled evidence on both sides, and justice clicked into place if you nudged it enough. She knew better now. Consequences did not show up to punish so much as to reveal. They revealed who people had become while no one was looking. A contractor who could not stand being challenged by a woman he did not think belonged. A security supervisor who long ago stopped seeing faces and only saw categories. A chief judge who learned to treat people as problems to be managed, not citizens to be served. The truth, she had learned, did not automatically save anyone. It did not reach back and give her uncle the years he lost. It did not erase the bruise on her arm or fix every case that had passed through a biased hallway. Truth did something quieter and more dangerous. It gave people a chance to start over, to repair, or to double down on who they already were. Courage, she realized, was not the charge into one big confrontation. It was the willingness to sit through one more story when you were tired of your own. To listen to yet another person describe being stopped, doubted, dismissed, and to answer, not with empty comfort, but with a form, a process, a path. Flawed, frustrating, but real. That night, she worked later than usual. When she finally shut down her computer and pushed her chair back, the building had settled into its after-hours hush. She turned out the lamp on her desk, then the overhead lights, leaving only the glow from the hallway spilling under the door. On her way out, she passed the big windows that overlooked the garage. Level 2 was visible from here if you knew where to look. Concrete striping, the faint suggestion of a pillar that had once felt like a wall. For a moment she stood there, hand on the cool glass, watching a security officer in a new uniform walk an older woman to her car, pointing out the exit, nodding as she talked. Nothing dramatic, just a small scene in a place that no longer pretended it was neutral. The morning they shoved her into that pillar, everyone involved thought it would end with a quiet report and a forgotten bruise. A little paperwork, a little gossip. Another day in a building that counted on people not making trouble. Instead, it became something else. A crack that never quite sealed. An echo that bounced from garage to chambers to basement and back again, changing people who heard it. Some echoes do not fade. We grow into them. If this story moved you or made you see justice in a new light, stay with us. Like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes their voice does not matter. The more people hear these echoes, the harder it becomes for any system to pretend it did not.